Hey YouTube, it's Enigma here. So this is our 11th session in Road to Cat RC Explain series. As usual, I will provide the PDF of the session in the comment section below, so you can try the RC yourself and then look at the solution for your better understanding. So this is of the RC, a paper published in Nature earlier this month by the social scientists Michael Park, Erin Lahey, and Russell Funk has prompted lively debate by suggesting that the proportion of disruptive papers and patents has been decreasing over time. So there has been a paper which is published in Nature, which can be a scientific journal or research magazine, by the social scientists Michael Park, Erin Lahey, and Russell Funk. And this paper has started a debate by saying that the proportion of disruptive papers and patents has been gradually been decreasing over time. Now this is a specific thing. What does the author mean by disruptive papers? We do not have a clue, so it may be explained in the further upcoming details. By analyzing more than 60 years of data from bibliometric and patent database, the author conclude that it is less likely now than in the mid 20th century that any one paper or patent will be highly disruptive. That is, that it will change the course of an entire scientific field. So author then says that what these three scientists did is that they compiled the 60 years of data from bibliometric and patent database, and they concluded that as compared to that of mid 20th century, the century that we are living right now, it is less likely that we will see any highly disruptive paper. So what do we mean by highly disruptive? A paper that will change the course of an entire scientific field, which means it is the next big thing, it is the most revolutionary thing that will change the entire field. Much of the reaction has involved soul searching about the implication for science. If innovation is slowing down, as well as a question about the nature of the modern scientific enterprise itself, this in turn is prompting more questions that could become the subject of further analysis. Now, because of this conclusion that these three have arrived at, there are some reactions which involves a lot of soul searching, which means a lot of introspection about science as a discipline itself. Because what are the implications for science if, let's say, innovation is slowing down, and the modern about implications about modern scientific enterprise itself, because science cannot thrive with innovation, isn't it? This is the most common sense sensical thing that we can even imagine. So this is specifically what is mentioned by the first paragraph itself. So let's look at the second paragraph. The study uses a number of measures of disruptiveness. The one that has attracted perhaps the most attention is called the CD index, which is based on citations. So in order to measure this disruptiveness, whether the paper is disruptive or not, the author has these three, you can say, scientists have used a lot of, you can say, measures or factors, but the factor which has gathered the most attention is actually the CD index, which is based on citations. As the authors write, if a paper or patent is disruptive, the subsequent work that cites it is less likely to also cite its predecessors. Whereas, if a paper or patent is consolidating, subsequent work that cites it is also more likely to cite its predecessors. In other words, with more consolidation, the same previously disruptive papers continue to be cited. Now, what does this whole paragraph means? So, let's say there are three papers, A, B, and C. And let's say if the paper A is actually disruptive, and another in case there is a paper A, there is paper B, and there is paper C. And in such a case, if paper B is disruptive or not is based on citations. That's what this paragraph means. Let's say if a paper A is disruptive and B produce something, B, you can say, analyze and researches something, and it writes some sort of research paper, and so for that it has used the reference of A itself, so he cites A. Now C is the, you can say, upcoming contender. Let's say this happens in 2014, this is in 2015, and this is in 2016. In 2016, another research paper is, you can say, written, and in this research paper, that is, you can see C research paper, it cites B, but it fails to cite A. It does not cite A, which means that the findings of the research paper B has overshadowed the findings of the research paper A, which means B itself becomes a disruptive paper, which is more, you can say, innovative than A itself, because C has not cited A. That is being specifically mentioned in the first paragraph itself. If a paper or patent is disruptive, as you can see in B, the subsequent work that cites it, that is C in 2016, is less likely to also cite its predecessor. They will not be citing its predecessor, that is A. That is being specifically mentioned in this paragraph. Now let's say if a research paper A is disruptive, so the research paper, this is also a case of 2014, this is a case of 2015, and this is a research paper case of 2016. In 2014, a disruptive paper is released B on 2015 used the findings of A in order to release a paper, and C in 2016 used the findings of B itself, and C itself it cites the findings of B and it cites the findings of A. In such a case, B has not overshadowed disruptiveness of A because C is citing A and B itself. So in such a case, B becomes a consolidating paper. It's not a disruptive paper. That's been mentioned in the second paragraph itself. Whereas if a paper or patent is consolidating in such a case, subsequent work that cites, which means C itself, is also more likely to cite its predecessor. As you can see, C is also citing A itself. In other words, with more consolidation, the same previously disruptive papers continue to be cited, which means as more and more consolidating papers are going on, which means only a single disruptive paper is, you can say, the only a single disruptive papers continue to be cited in further works. That's specifically the essence of this second paragraph itself. Single papers do not have the potential to disrupt or create fields. One of the best known examples is James Watson and Francis Crick's model of DNA from 1953, created with the help of Rosalind Franklin's groundbreaking X-ray crystallographic work. But new directions also arise from many studies reporting long-running research efforts. So author says that single papers do not have the potential to disrupt or create fields. And one of the best known example for this is James Watson and Francis Crick's models of DNA, which was created in 1953. And it was created with the help of Rosalind Franklin's groundbreaking X-ray crystallographic work. But it doesn't mean that it was based on something and it was not disruptive enough, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have any uses, as new directions also arise from many studies reporting long-running research efforts. So new direction can also arise from such studies which are, you can say, not enough to be groundbreaking, or you can say have the potential to disrupt fields. Gravitational waves are one example. Much as the paper from the LIGO collaboration reporting the first direct detection of a gravitational wave is itself highly cited, subsequent work has continued to cite work that led up to it. So this is specifically one example of this phenomena itself, that the discovery of gravitational waves, which was done, it has been further, the subsequent work has also continued to cite that you can say discovery as well. So researchers cite studies for different reasons and not only to acknowledge previously important work that is being built upon. So we came to realize that researchers actually cite studies for different reasons, not specifically because of a same reason, and not only to acknowledge previously important work that is being built upon. So it's not the only reason. We don't cite a research paper just because to acknowledge the importance that the research paper carry. There are multiple reasons due to which we cite that research paper in itself. Park and his colleague do control for some of these things to better compare disruptiveness today with the several decades ago. So you can say Park and his colleague do control all of these things in order to realize whether, you can say, what were the citations right now and what were the citations 10 decades ago. Nature spoke to a number of scholars who study science and innovation. The paper by Park and his colleague, they say, builds on pattern identified elsewhere in the specialistic literature, and some are worried by the findings implications. So what the Nature, which you can say the scientific journals, the scientific journal in which the paper was, you can say, published, they talked to a number of scholars who study science and innovation. And the paper which was produced by Park raises concern towards, you can say, science in itself. Some fellows and, you can say, colleagues are literally worried about the implications of the finding itself. Science and innovation are drivers of both growth and productivity, and declining disruptiveness could be linked to the sluggish productivity and economic growth being seen in many parts of the world. And they say that, you can say, science and innovation are actually the drivers of both growth and productivity. And since, you can say, disruptiveness is declining, which means innovation is declining in some sort of aspect, it is actually linked to the sluggish productivity, which means productivity itself is sluggish, and economic growth being seen in many parts of the world. So it is more probably due to you can say sluggish productivity and due to economic growth that we are seeing science and innovations you can say both declining in some sort of aspect. That is specifically, you can say, the mention here which is being provided in the, you can say, the fourth paragraph itself, isn't it? So let's look at the last two paragraphs. Others argue that a decline in the fraction of disruptive science shouldn't cause concern if the absolute number of disruptive studies has remained relatively constant over time. If a greater proportion of publication are consolidating, that could just reflect the current scientific situation. In many disciplines, the fundamentals are agreed on, so most further advances will be incremental rather than disruptive. So one portion of the scholars are saying that this is very, you can say, this is very worrisome, the implications of the study. But the other says you shouldn't worry. Let's say onto the period of 2010s, and 2020s, there were only 5 studies which were, you can say, disruptive. And on to 2010 until 2017, there were only 3 studies. So it's not that you can say there is a decline in disruptiveness. What if if you compare 2010 to 2020, there are, you can say, there are also 5 studies. So it's not as if we shouldn't worry about disruptiveness, decline of, paper who are disruptive, if number of papers over a course of time of are remain constant. That is the specifically thing that is mentioned here. And also they also conclude at the end of the statement that because the every discipline has a solid foundation built down, so the further research that is going on, the further advancement in a research is meant to be incremental. It's not like every research is going to be disruptive. That is being mentioned in the last paragraph itself, if you clearly remember. In many disciplines, the fundamentals of are agreed on, so most further advances will be incremental rather than disruptive. So this is specifically the concern of the other scholars and scientific scholars. It is also possible that researchers are recording more incremental steps in formal research papers than before. So author says that is it also possible that the researchers are recording more incremental steps rather than waiting to report of something greater significance. So it can also be possible that I am actually waiting for, rather than waiting for something significant, the whatever improvement I am finding, I am citing that and I am producing that. No doubt scholars will further analyze the importance of this finding using qualitative empirical approaches such as detailed interviews and observations that capture researchers' own experience in individual fields. So, and author is specifically saying that scholars will further analyze the importance of these findings that has been produced using qualitative empirical approaches such as detailed interviews and observations that gives a further insight about what is occurring right now. So this is the science-based RC. So it is a pretty simple RC. The flow of ideas is pretty logical itself. So let's look at the questions, and if we need to go back to the passage itself, we will go back. On the basis of the passage, which of the following statement can be regarded as true? So what are the statements which are regarded as true or are present in the passage itself? So let's look at one by one. Formal research papers in today's age are hardly peer reviewed. We do not have any clue about whether the formal research papers in today's world are hardly reviewed or not. In fact, the only you can say the reference of formal research papers that occurred is, you can say, in the last 2 paragraph itself, and it doesn't say in any way, you can say, in last 2 paragraph itself there has been not even a single mention that the formal research papers in today's age are hardly peer reviewed. So this has not been given in the passage. Scholars who study science and innovation belong only to STEM fields. Now, only is definitely extreme here. There has not been a mention to STEM field as well. So this is also relevant. Option number 3, if innovation is steadily declining, it can cause interdisciplinary conflict. This is also not implied here. There is no mention that if innovation is steadily declining, it can lead to feud between science or some other field. It's been not been mentioned in specifically that in science itself, the fields would be, you can say, interdisciplinary conflicts. One discipline would be conflicting with other discipline. This has not been mentioned here. So by elimination itself, 4 is the answer. So let's read the 4th option. The perceived decline in innovation could be linked to other factors. Exactly. The author states that it's not always, citation is not always, there are multiple use of citations, and the declining in innovation could be linked to other factors as well. If you look at the clearly, there is one group, first group is actually very concerned when it comes to the decline of innovation, but the second says that it is actually fine, and if the number of disruptive papers or a period of time remain constant, there is nothing which is actually worried about. So definitely 4 is the correct answer towards the first question. Second question, which of the following statement could be an accurate inference from the example of James Watson and Francis Crick's model of DNA? So we have to check for the accurate inference for James Watson and Francis Crick's model of DNA. James Watson was a practicing doctor, so he could conduct research on DNA. There has absolutely been no mention whether James Watson was a doctor or not. The only mention that we had, if you can go back here, look at this. Single paper do not have the potential to disrupt a creative field. One of the best known examples is James Watson and Francis Crick's model of DNA from 1953, created with the help of Rosalind Franklin's groundbreaking X-ray crystallographic work. But new directions also arise from same studies reporting long-running research efforts. So that is been specifically mentioned here, that the work of James Watson and Francis Crick was very heavily created with the groundbreaking work of Rosalind Franklin's X-ray crystallographic work. And although the work of James Watson and Francis Crick was not itself disruptive or creating field, but the new direction it gave to other long running research efforts is, you can say, phenomenal or something that we can infer. So that is probably that we have to pick for. It's not, there is no mention that James Watson was a practicing doctor, so this cannot be inferred. James Watson proved to be a better researcher than Francis Crick. There has been not a comparison between James Watson and Francis Crick. James Watson and Francis Crick research created new scopes in their respective field. This is exactly what we can infer. And the option number 4, James Watson X-ray crystallographic work proved to be a boon for medical professionals. There has been not a mention for medical professional as well here. So this also cannot be accurate inference which can be drawn from these statements. So definitely third is the answer. Question number 3. Based on the information in the passage, all of the following claims can be inferred except. So which of the following claims cannot be inferred? So we have no clue right now whether which paragraph or what would be included this. So we need a total coherent understanding of the whole passage itself to, you can say, attempt this question. Qualitative empirical research approach involves comprehensive interviews and observation among others. This is specifically true, isn't it? Because if you look at the last paragraph itself, it says that using qualitative empirical approaches such as detailed interviews and observations that capture researchers' own experience in individual fields. So this is specifically being mentioned here. So one is definitely present, so thereby it is not the answer. The middle decades of 20th century saw fewer revolutionary researchers as compared to today. This is specifically wrong. It's the complete opposite. The middle 20th century saw more revolutionary researches as compared to that of today. We have, the author specifically said, if you look at the second paragraph itself, here, if you look at clearly, by analyzing more than 60 years of data from bibliometric and patent database, the author concludes that it is less likely now than in the middle 20th century that any one paper or patent will be highly disruptive, which means there's a perceived decline in the amount of disruptive papers, isn't it? So that is something that we can infer. So this is something which is completely opposite to what the author is saying, and hence by marking us our answer. So let's check the third and fourth as well. As per the CD index, a paper could be deemed disruptive if the works that follow it fail to cite its predecessors. Exactly, that's being mentioned in the paragraph, isn't it? That if a paper is called disruptive if its predecessors, which means like E and F, fail to cite, you can say ABC. If ABC are not being cited and only D is being cited, that means that paper is disruptive itself. So this is actually being inferred in the passage itself. So this is not the answer. Option number 4, not everyone agree that a fall in the percentage of disruptive research should be a matter of concern. This is also mentioned here as specifically said by the other groups, that you can say that the decline in the fraction of disruptive science shouldn't cause concern if the absolute number of disruptive studies has remained relatively constant over time. So it's specifically not a consensus of a single group. Others says that there could be percentage of the percentage of disruptive research should not be a matter of concern because not everyone is agreeing on to it. So definitely fourth is mentioned in the passage itself. So the answer to the third question becomes the second option. So let's look at the last question of the RC. Which of the following statement best reflects the main argument of the last paragraph of the passage? So which of the following is the main argument of the last paragraph of the passage? What was the last paragraph talking about? Let's go back to the last paragraph. So the last paragraph was this. It was talking about that it is possible that researchers are recording more incremental steps in the formal research paper than before rather than waiting to report something of greater significance. So this passage opens up by the possibility that it is possible that rather than waiting for, let's say I have created a study and I am actually measuring the efficiency of a new fuel. I am measuring the efficiency of a new fuel compared to petroleum. And although the fuel that I've created is not groundbreaking, but it is significantly, you can say, better than petrol. So rather than waiting for if it becomes the next big step in the science, I just release the data of that new fuel that I've produced. So this is something that the author has said, that rather than waiting for something disruptive, they are releasing whatever findings that they can produce. No doubt scholars will further analyze the importance of this finding using qualitative empirical approaches, and the author says that the scholars will be actually analyzing this finding in the upcoming time. So this is the main idea of the last passage itself. So let's look at the option which you can say contains these information. The findings of the paper in Nature are most likely to be further analyzed and evaluated. This is exactly what the main idea of the last paragraph is. Let's check for a better option in second 3 4, and if we do not find any better option, then one should be the answer. An empirical approach can largely only be qualitative and open-minded in its methodology. This is an extreme option. There has been no mention that the empirical approach is the can only be qualitative. It's not always that the empirical approach can only be qualitative. It can be other as well. There are other variety of, you can say, approaches as well. So it is no mention in the paragraph itself that it can be only be qualitative. It makes it extreme. Option number third, an empirical approach is effectively the best tool to conduct a challenging research product. There has been not a comparison between, you can say, other techniques, and there is no mention in the paragraph itself that the empirical approach is the best tool. There has been no mention as that the empirical approach is best. So therefore, this option is also wrong. The findings of the paper in Nature are conclusive and have raised pertinent concerns. The problem is that the findings in the Nature are not conclusive. The author says in the last line itself that no doubt scholar will further analyze the importance of this finding, which means the findings are not conclusive, isn't it? We need more information about this as well. So 4 is also not the option, hence 1 is the answer to this question itself. I hope you like this session, and in the further sessions as well, we will be taking a lot more RCs and we'll be solving a lot more questions in order to further elaborate on this series.